I took somebody's pen. I don't know if that was yours or not.
No, that's
Or Janet's, maybe. It's just after 8 o'clock, and we'll have Janet roll call, if Janet is available to do that. Yep, no, I just saw that.
Bob Fiedler,
Present.
Paul Adams.
Here.
Mark Carlson. Present. Kathy Leaf.
Present.
Tim Ramberg.
Here.
The committee is all present, and I just ask, we've had the meetings, the minutes, I'm sorry, in our packets. Could we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes from previous meeting.
Supervisor Leaf moved to approve. Can we have a second?
Second.
Second by Supervisor Adams. Any objections? They're approved. Okay, public comment. We've got about 5 people who have signed up for public comment this morning, and I'm just going to take them in the order they were received. So we'll start with Carol. And Carol, I always apologize because I can never remember precisely how to say your name, but I'll say Ivance. Okay, Carol.
This isn't on, is it? It's on. It is on? Oh, okay. I don't see any lights. Hi, my name's Carol Ivance. I live in Hudson, and I'd like to begin by thanking those members of this committee who do believe in the rule of law and our Constitution and are willing to stand for those beliefs and uphold your oath of office. For the rest of you, including some unelected folks who are here, if you don't think that upholding our constitutional laws is your job, then what is? Setting aside the fact that you obviously lied when you took your oath of office and think nothing of it, as I don't have time for that issue, it certainly looks like tearing up our Constitution and trampling on our God-given liberties is your idea of what you're on the SCC board for. I'm basing this on your obvious lack of respect for your fellow supervisors and your constituents, and your primary school deceitful tactics and hypocrisy. On December 1st at this committee meeting, you had no problem with the two-way resolution, but less than a week later, it was a totally different story, not to mention the underhanded shenanigans and very fishy lack of discussion that took place here. If you can't be mature enough to be honest, you have no business in public office. Now, I'm well aware that too many of our public servants are totally deceitful and have no idea what it means to serve and are doing their best to control us instead, but that's not grounds for you to follow their terrible example. The best reason for you to do your actual job and uphold the law of our land is that you and your family live here too. Do you really think that a term or more on the county board will ensure that you and your descendants will be in the elite ruling class if you and your socialist buddies succeed in destroying this country and wresting our precious liberties from us? Take a good look at the history of any of the tragically long list of countries that have succumbed to tyranny. You'll find that the folks at the bottom of the ladder who were duped into ushering in the dictators were some of the first to be disposed of. And you are no different. I hope that you will seriously reconsider your position and support the original two-way resolution, even if only for your own sake and that of your children and grandchildren. Although it's your job, of course, to serve your constituents. Thank you.
Our next public comment will be from Grant Lind.
Good morning.
Good
Thank
morning.
you for being here today in this wonderful weather that we're having. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Second Amendment. I spend a very large amount of my time dealing with Second Amendment, with the laws, rules that the state has imposed upon us. I train every single week. Hundreds and hundreds of people conceal carry, basic firearm safety. And the one thing that I will tell you is that the people who are most active in shooting sports, most active in the Second Amendment world, are home, or they're at their job. They're doing their lives. They just want to be left alone. They like their lives. They like their guns. They like their freedom. The sad part is that they don't come out and speak. So I'm here today speaking on behalf of the thousands of people I've trained and the people I know in my community that aren't here today to say that this is vital this is vital, that we get the Second Amendment dealt with at our local level so that it can't be infringed upon by the levels above us, that the state can't infringe upon our rights, and that the federal government can't infringe upon our rights. It is so important that we understand that we personally are responsible for our own safety. We are personally responsible for our own actions, for our own behaviors. And because of that, we need to make sure that we have the rights established by the Constitution taken personally. And it's very important that the supervisors and that your committee takes a serious look at how do we take care of our constituents, as I'm one of them. The Supreme Court ruled that law enforcement carries a firearm to defend themselves. Not you, not my wife, not my kids, but they are carrying firearms to defend themselves. When they come to an accident scene, they're there to take the report because the accident's already done. And that's a sad thought, but it's a reality, and we have to live with it every day. And so I'm very adamant in my teaching of people personal protection, how to care for themselves, how to protect themselves. And I want to make sure that we as a community can continue to do that, and that we are not having stuff imposed upon us by those outside. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Grant. Our next comments will come from Kathy Brocky. And I didn't make a point of this when we had the beginning of public comment, but we're very flexible at this committee in trying to accommodate public comment, but we also ask our speakers to try to limit themselves to no more than 3 minutes.
And I just have a very brief comment, so thank you for that opportunity. I recently had the opportunity to watch the video recording of the December 6th full board meeting, and the public comments provided at that meeting detailed every reason why this resolution is unnecessary and not within the responsibilities of a county board. I've also expressed my thoughts to each of you via email. At the end of that December 6th meeting, Supervisor Long made a statement encouraging the board to refrain from considering symbolic resolutions. I would encourage this committee to begin with this one by tabling it indefinitely and not bringing it to the full board again. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next commenter will be Sue Curtis.
Thank you. Appreciate this opportunity. I still oppose this resolution and any further symbolic, conspiratorial, political resolutions. The result of this resolution so far has compromised at least 4 work hours each, times 19 of the county supervisors, costs of attorney, administrative assistance. That's 60 hours plus additional costs that's unnecessary. All the emails that you read at home takes time. These are hours that our supervisors could be working on solutions to help everyday people in crisis, mental health, aging and disability, services for homeless. These are opportunities that are lost. It has compromised your reputation as a board and put the community at further odds and brought out partisan behaviors on a nonpartisan board. At the December meeting, we heard some supervisors that believe the Second Amendment is the amendment that protects and lifts up all other amendments. That statement is opinion and not fact. See, I feel the opposite. I feel that voting rights are what keep our Constitution alive and keep the people in office that need to be there to keep our Constitution alive. So there's different opinions about what is important in all of the constitutions, of the two constitutions and of the amendments. So again, I really encourage you to stay away from symbolic resolutions. And if you were to pass this, then I will suggest that we move forward with other resolutions for voting rights, women's rights, equality, other components of the Constitution and amendments that are equally as important. Again, I thank you for your work, and I hope that you move forward in a positive manner.
Thank you, and our next commenter will be Carrie Kittel. Sorry about that, Carrie.
I'd like to start by thanking you again for an opportunity. I made a lot of arguments in opposition, and other people made the same arguments, so I'm not going to go over that ground. But I think first to understand that folks at your level of governance take all kinds of input, and I know you got a ton on this one on emails and phone calls, and it's unfortunate that you get to be the target of kind of disrespectful and borderline bullying comments. I appreciate the fact that you're part of the system that protects the rights. I mean, everybody gets to come here and have their say, and maybe they agree, maybe they don't, but all are heard, and I think that's an important thing to remember. I still think my primary opposition is that singling out the Second Amendment is wrong. It suggests that the other amendments by comparison are not important. I don't think anything could be further from the truth. My opinion is they wrote the First Amendment like a laundry list. These are the things that are most important to us and most necessary to protect the situation going forward. It troubles me too, the response that the Second Amendment is there to protect all of our other rights. It really, I'm concerned that with that kind of thinking, that the appropriate response to you as an individual perceiving your rights have been violated is to grab your guns. And I don't think you have to take too much imagination to understand where that leads. And finally, my wife observed this going home. I don't think Second Amendment rights are under attack. I think they've been protected consistently by the courts. But she observed that we just had deer hunting season. Everybody who wanted gave all their information to the government. Some people have given that information to the government for 50 years or more. And I'm not aware of any time the government's used that information to come get your guns. I just think it's an issue. This is a solution in search of a problem, and I would really urge you to vote against any and all future resolutions. Thank you. Such resolutions. Sorry for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have no other slips for public comment, so we'll end public comment at this point if there's no other public comment. We will now go to our business items, and the first item on the agenda is the resolution to support the U.S. Constitution and the Wisconsin Constitution and the rights explicitly provided therein. And so just a moment of history on that. This committee did pass something out in early December. It was taken up at our full board about 4 or 5 days later, and the full board referred the matter back to the committee. So we are back in that position, and the resolution that we'd have in front of us would be the resolution we'd adopted before. And as I did before, I'd like to at least call initially on the author of the resolution, Supervisor Carlson, to bring that before the body if he'd like to.
Thank you, sir. After what's gone on since this was first proposed, I am more convinced than ever that it is an important and a right thing for us to do. For several reasons. One of the main arguments that I've seen against it is...
Before we get into a discussion, could we just move to bring it to the table? And then we'll need a second, then we can have a discussion.
I forget that kind of stuff. I'll make a motion to move it to the table.
Is there a second? Is there a second? If there's no second, the motion will not be adopted. Dies for lack of a second. At this point, though, I would like to say that if Supervisor Carlson or any of the other supervisors would like to make any comment on this topic, I think that would be appropriate.
I think I'll save comment for now, and I'll write out a comment and send it out. I have lots of emails to respond to, so not to spend time here.
I'm going to make a very short comment, just saying that this is a tough issue for everybody. And there's been a lot of comment on it, a lot of very good comment on both sides of this issue. You've got at least 3 people that I know of, and there's maybe more on this committee that are veterans who served under the ice caps, in the case of Supervisor Carlson, who've served 20 to 30 years in the case of myself and Colonel Adams. And, you know, we fully understand the Constitution. We understand, we've defended it, we've sworn to it many, many times in our lives, and we reaffirm our oath that I think we took 8 months ago to support it as county supervisors. But there's many ways you can look at how we have to do our business, what's appropriate for us to do our business. And one of the public commenters commented on our chairman's comment about whether it's worthwhile to have symbolic resolutions or not. Clearly, we could point to the Heller case at the Supreme Court that absolutely provided for the right to keep and bear arms, separate and aside from the militia issues in that amendment. Absolute right to keep and bear arms. Several years later, in the McDonald case, which was a Chicago case, where the Chicago had banned the possession of guns, Heller, the Supreme Court ruled that they would apply what they had done in Heller to the federal entities. They ruled that they would apply it to the states and local entities. So it applies to us. It applies to St. Croix County. It applies to Hudson. So they absolutely, 100%, said you have the right to keep and bear arms. As far as I know, there's no amendments pending at the Wisconsin legislature would come even close to interfering with that issue. So it's an important issue. And there was also a very good comment about many countries that have fallen into dictatorships. First thing they did was take away your guns. But I don't think we're anywhere near that yet. And so we're in the midst of a very difficult discussion on it. But I'd like to thank everybody for their good comments from the public today, for their written comments, and just assure folks that I'm certain that there's nothing at all will come out of this committee that will interfere with your right to keep and bear arms. Is there any other comment? Supervisor Carlson.
I'd like to take back what I said and make a quick comment.
Absolutely.
Why I feel this is important, one thing, I want to be proactive instead of just reactive. All the people that have emailed me, and I've read most of them, I'm going to try to respond to all of them, has convinced me that this is worth doing. Excuse me. The reason why is so many people, there was a call to action, people were so worried about it, to write letters to us. Most of the content was, oh, this is a waste of our time. It didn't need to be a waste of our time. It could have been a real quick vote because we all took the oath. It shouldn't even be controversial. I remind you that President Biden also took the oath, and he repeated again since the last meeting that he wants to get rid of all semi-automatics. So there is action going on. Milwaukee voted against Milwaukee County, who also took the oath. They also infringed. Laws on gun rights are infringement by definition. So if not important, why the call to action campaign? Why would, if people stood up here, they've been here a couple times now, said, oh, this isn't important, but they took the time to write letters and show up to speak against it, to say it's not important. If it wasn't important, why aren't you home, you know? I'm glad you came and spoke. I try to take everybody seriously. Other amendments equal, yes or no, but if you look at what the Founding Fathers said, they said that is there as a last resort, the Second Amendment, in case a tyrannical government tries to intrude on our other rights. So it is bedrock in that way. If all the other rights aren't being treaded on, then the Second Amendment never actually even comes into effect. But if it is, and if you say that can't happen, that's exactly what happened during the American Revolution. They had weapons, and they were able to fight back because their rights were on. So and I'll leave it at that. I really appreciate everybody spending their time. It's the way government's supposed to work. Citizens speak up, and I've had lots speak for, and I've had lots speak against, and we're supposed to listen and respond. And putting this amendment, or this resolution in, was part of what I considered valid response, not a waste of time.
Thank you for your very thoughtful statement, Supervisor Carlson. And now we'll turn to our County Administrator for a financial report.
The financial report in the packet is through November. I have been looking ahead at the end of December numbers. What I can say is that as you look through the financial report, you will see individual lines that are in red, particularly like the Sheriff's Department overtime, things like that. Any individual line items may exceed the budget, but really we evaluate the departments based upon the bottom line from each of the departments. So while they may be over on some lines, they're under on others. And overall, what I would say is that all of the departments are going to be finishing in the black or very close to the budgeted amounts. So I don't have any major concerns with the budget. I think we'll end up just fine, as we usually do, because of the good work that the department heads do. But if there are any questions specific to the budget doc or the financial report in the packet, I'd be happy to answer those.
I can't believe you're going to get off this easy this morning.
Well, it's too early to tell.
Well, I know we don't want you to leave the podium quite yet, but our next speaker, our next presentation is our circuit court update. I know we'll be hearing some very important issues will be coming up there, some of which might involve money. So if the county administrator is going to be staying around, that would be maybe helpful in the event we have questions as a result of the circuit court update.
I will be here, but I did not bring any extra money with me.
Okay. On that high note, we'll turn to Judge Nordstrom and for the circuit court update and related comments.
All right, and pardon my voice today. I've got a little bit of a cold, but I tested negative. So, and Judge Waterman may have some additional comments here as well today. In general, I wanted to focus on an issue today. Judge Needham is on vacation, so it was an opportunity for me to step in and talk a little bit about treatment court and some challenges that we're facing in treatment court. I wanted to give a little background on what treatment court is for those who aren't aware. But I'm the presiding judge of treatment court. Judge Waterman was my predecessor, and Judge Black served so Judge Waterman served 5 years, Judge Black served 10 years in that role since it began. So it's a long-term program here in St. Croix County. It's basically an alternative to prison. It's designed to be for those most significant cases involving substance abuse or substance use disorder. And it involves people necessarily who have a high risk of reoffending, and have a high need for substance abuse treatment. Violent offenders are excluded by statute, and that's part of the process that we go through. The target length of the program is about 1.5 years. In the program, I see people every week early on, and then they move to more varied, less time in front of the court, so that we have 4 different phases, and in phase 4 they come every 2 months. Phase 1, they come every week, and they progress over the course of 1.5 years or so. We currently have 16 participants. We had a graduation yesterday and had a couple of graduations in December, so our numbers have declined. We have a capacity of about 20 to 25. 25, Kate would probably get upset with me if I said that was the actual capacity, but I think 20 is at least safe. Kate is sitting back there. She's our treatment court coordinator, who works very closely on this. Our treatment court team is a multidisciplinary team that includes myself as judge, the treatment court coordinator, the district attorney, the public defender, a probation agent, because everybody in our program has to be on probation and under supervision by the Department of Corrections, sheriff's office representative, and an HHS substance use disorder counselor who brings us information about the treatment progress of our participants. The treatment court structure has been 2 tracks historically. That's for the last few years. We added a track years ago. Judge Waterman probably remembers when. I wasn't here when that happened, but we had 2 tracks. Track 1 is our highest risk of reoffense track. They have the highest treatment need as well, generally involving controlled substances and related charges involving, it could be burglary, it could be forgery, it could be possession of a controlled substance, but again, nothing violent. Treatment need likely requires what they call intensive outpatient treatment, IOP. And we'll talk about what that means because that's really the issues that we're facing right now. Our treatment program in the county that we've used for many years is called the Matrix program at the IOP level. And that's also a program that's used by the Department of Corrections. It's widely in use for intensive outpatient treatment around the state with those that are offenders. Track 2 was a high risk of reoffense, a high need for treatment, but not as high as Track 1. I know that's kind of iffy, but generally it involved people with alcohol use and OWI charges. There are some exceptions. Some very high-risk OWIs did come to Track 1, et cetera, but generally that's what Track 2 was about. And their level of treatment program was outpatient level treatment, or 1 notch down, so to speak, in terms of the hours needed. The treatment program that we use here in county, and we still do for in that level of treatment, is called Living in Balance, okay? These are both Hazelden-based programs, and as I said, Matrix and Living in Balance. Now, Track 2 was eliminated. We've talked about this in committee, I think, last year. Track 2 has been eliminated and is winding down. We only have 1 participant left, and with I hope she graduates within the next couple of months. The reason is that the changes in the legislation regarding mandatory sentencing for OWI 5s and 6s requires that essentially they go to prison. There is an exception for a year. They're required to go to prison for 1.5 years, and there is an exception for 1 year, but that's also a prison sentence. So in any case, we need the people to be able to stay in our community to participate in treatment court. The target audience for this Track 2 was essentially OWI 5s and 6s. OWI 4s, for reasons we don't need to go into, but 3s and 4s, 3 is a misdemeanor, 4 is a first-level felony. There's a less incentive for people to want to sign up for 1.5 years looking at me. In treatment court is voluntary. They have to apply and be accepted. And the risk-reward balance of OWI 4s and 3s is such that it's very unlikely to get people who want to sign up for treatment court for those charges. So as a result, Track 2 has been eliminated. Now, so I wanted to give everybody sort of an understanding of what we're dealing with here. So we now have Track 1, highest risk, highest need, generally controlled substance offenses. All of our treatment programs in the county to date have been delivered by the St. Croix County Health and Human Services Department. To give you a sense of these programs and what we're doing, what we look at as treatment court team members is the National Association of Drug Court Professionals has set standards for what treatment courts should do. We participate in their programs, and we try to comply with their standards. Now, their sense of what treatment hours are necessary in a treatment court is about 200 hours of treatment over the course of participation in treatment court. Our Matrix program, which was our highest level of treatment, we got it up to last summer with some positive changes that were made by HHS in terms of programming to 142 hours. If you added in other kinds of programming provided by HHS, other groups that aren't technically in Matrix, we were getting close to that mark that the NADCP thinks is appropriate and necessary to be successful in treatment court for the highest level need. That's the Matrix program. Now, here's what we learned in December. HHS has had some real difficulties with staffing. Everybody's got difficulties with staffing, but their challenges are enormous. They lost quite a number of their treatment counselors. And so early December, we learned that we were going to have to adjust the hours in the Matrix program. In other words, it was going to drop down because there was less ability to deliver that. That was, and I don't know that I ever even got a schedule that showed how that was going to change in terms of the hours of treatment delivery for our highest need folks in Track 1. Then there was another staffing problem that happened, and we got additional information from HHS that they were not going to be able to take any new participants or any new clients at HHS for treatment. This is a temporary thing because of the staffing problems that they've got. They want to focus on the people they have and not take in new clients. So, what does that mean for treatment court? What that means is we had to tell people that we can't take new participants. That was toward, I think we got the notice mid-December, and within a week we had told folks, all the lawyers and the DA and the public defenders and everybody who participates, we said that we needed to close treatment court to new participants because if we can't deliver treatment, then we can't have treatment court for new folks. The other thing that happened is the folks that are in the program now, we were informed that the Matrix program is in the intensive outpatient treatment level is not going to be available anymore going forward at HHS. And so all those folks in the Matrix level program were being transferred to the Living in Balance program, the lower level program. So that's what has happened. The result of that is, obviously, it's a challenge for the treatment court when we can't take new participants. We've graduated 3 or 4 this last month just by happenstance. They were in phase 4 and they were graduating, so we're down to 16 participants. We've got 2 that are applicants waiting. We've told them, we're on a temporary hold right now. And we haven't, obviously we're sort of closed to additional applicants at this time. I know that, this is a difficult situation for the county. It's not the role of judges to tell the county how to spend their money, what you're going to fund, what you aren't, how you deliver services or not. But as a treatment court judge, I have to be concerned about how we deliver the treatment court as a whole to the participants. And certainly as a presiding judge of treatment court, I have to be concerned about that. Now, what HHS has said is that they're going to continue to do assessments, that is, to see if you need treatment, but all the referrals will be made, for now at least, to private entities. So there are private entities in the county. I think most notable is Programs for Change at the Hudson Hospital or through Health Partners. There's also some programs at Berkwood, which is a facility in Burkhart, and there may be others. So what I've been working on with Phil, our Director of Justice Services, which is where treatment court is housed, is to look at these private providers and see if they can provide the intensive outpatient treatment that the county can't provide anymore. Because the reality is most folks that are going to be coming into that now only track 1, are going to be diagnosed and needing intensive outpatient treatment. I mean, that's been my experience. They generally are. There could be exceptions. So we need to be able to provide that level of treatment if they're going to participate in treatment court effectively. And it may be that our local providers can do that. Now, there's some challenges to this that I think you should be aware of. One, they probably charge a lot more than HHS has been charging for their services. So how has this been paid for? And this is my understanding, so I may be not quite right on this, but in asking a few questions. People who are in treatment court, at least, we try to get them, if they don't have insurance, we try to get them on Badger Care. Now, part of the problem is we also require them to get a job. And sometimes when they get a job, they become ineligible for Badger Care. But hopefully, their employer provides insurance. And so the bottom line is we try to get people in treatment court to have insurance. So the first payer to HHS for the treatment services they get is private insurance. And so that's one way in which it gets paid. The other thing that St. Croix County has that I'm told is fairly unique is for the Matrix program, this higher level need, the Department of Corrections has a special program for St. Croix County where they sort of fund the difference. In other words, if health insurance covers this much of the bill from HHS, and these people are on supervision with the Department of Corrections, the Department of Corrections will pay for the balance, or at least some portion of that. According to my discussions with the DOC agent who would apparently know, it's somewhere around $50,000 a year, but Ken probably knows better than I about what we take in from the Department of Corrections in terms of payments to cover treatment that's being provided to people on supervision. So that's a positive for our county. We'll want to make sure that however we get treatment for the people in treatment court, that we continue to get the advantage of that income stream, if it's possible. And Phil's been in discussions with the Department of Corrections personnel to see if that could be, for example, maybe it can be redirected to programs for change in some way if they were a provider that's available. Now, as treatment court judge and with the help of, and guidance from Phil as the Director of Justice Services and our treatment court coordinator, we're going to be meeting today with the people from Programs for Change to see whether or not they've got an intensive outpatient program that could work for us. So that's, it's a challenge. Obviously, I'd like to be able to be bringing people into treatment court. I'd like to be able to get the services they need to them. But, these are difficult times to get staff that can actually deliver these services to people. And I don't know why that's difficult to keep people and all of that, but I see it in the courts as well. So maybe on that issue, I don't know if Judge Waterman, if you've got anything you'd like to add. I know I've gone on and on here, but I wanted to give everybody my fullest understanding of what's going on.
I don't. I think Judge Nordstrand covered it well.
I was just going to call on Judge Waterman if you had any extra comments, or Mr. Gale, if he would like to add anything to what Judge Nordstrom said. And then we'll open it up for questions.
No, the judge covered it well. And again, Kate has done a great job of setting up meetings for us. I'm confident that at least today's meeting will shed some light on our path forward. I think there is a path forward. I think the biggest component, again, it's kind of that two-pronged approach. Can a program provide that intensive treatment that a lot of our folks need? And then who's going to help us fill that void financially for the folks that are underinsured or uninsured and what that looks like? But I think there is a path forward.
Well, if I could jump in with the first question, I'll turn back to the county administrator. We kind of prepped him that there might be a question on this, but could he shed light on what the financial situation is relative to the overall area that Judge Nordstrom spoke about and what some of our options might be going forward?
Yeah, the dollar amounts at HHS haven't changed. It's just the personnel. And so the personnel that we're providing those services are still funded positions. It's just that those positions are vacant. And some of it is the skill set of the people that they're able to bring in to fill the positions. Some are better suited for this area, better suited for that area. So they are working on filling those positions, so that may be an option in the future. I don't know that that's been fully determined yet. The second part is the funding for when people are uninsured. That's an area that we do not have any budgetary resources for. So that's why Dr. Gale is working so hard to find solutions there, and they'll continue to work on that.
If I could add one thing on that, and I think,
absolutely,
and I only raise this not as treatment court judge, but just as an issue that we need to be mindful of, is every week Judge Waterman and I and the other two circuit judges here sentence a lot of people involved with OWI charges and substance use charges, controlled substance charges. The statute requires, in most cases, that we include in our judgments that they have to have an AODA, alcohol and other drug abuse assessment, and follow through with treatment. And that's a positive thing because it's an opportunity for them to make a change and hopefully not come back. And these are not people in treatment court. These are just regular Joes who are going through the system, and they've now been convicted of, say, possession of meth. They've been put on probation, and they've been required to do this. And so the Department of Corrections is going to dutifully see to it that they do this during their time of supervision.
Judge, just to clarify, that's state law that they're required to do that.
Right. The statute requires us to sentence them to that, depending on the all the high-level substance abuse ones require it, and I think the OWI requires it as well. So we have to sentence them to this, and then these folks are required to go do it by order of the court. And in fact, if they don't do it, often their supervision time can be extended until they do it. Okay, so we'll get a request. They didn't do it in the last year, and so you've got to extend probation so they can get it done. This change here in terms of, for example, now not taking any new clients impacts that too. And so you should be aware of that. Again, it's not my job to talk about policy or what the county's doing or shouldn't do, but that, and how we pay for it. But the reality is judges are sentencing people to have to do this. If they live in St. Croix County, they've got to do the assessment here in St. Croix County, and the county has to provide it. That much I do know. And then once the treatment is determined to be necessary, they have to go get the treatment somewhere. If they've got private insurance, they can go to Programs for Change or somewhere. If they are indigent, then some way has to be managed for them to get that treatment. And I honestly don't know how that will work in a situation where the county is at least presently not taking new clients for treatment. So I just offer that up as another problem, so I honestly don't know how that gets addressed. But obviously we hope that there's going to be a time when the staffing needs have been resolved enough so you can take new participants. And I think that certainly will happen, hopefully sooner than later. But I'll give you an example. If the county is not in the business of providing intensive outpatient treatment anymore, and the assessment that they do comes back and says, this person needs intensive outpatient treatment, we're kind of in that same boat again. In other words, how are they, without financial resources, going to comply with the court's judgment and get that done? And obviously, it's in everybody's best interest that they do get it done. So, this is something else for Phil to think about, I think, in this process, to see, what are the needs and how can we fill that need too.
Just a quick question on the latter item you brought up, the assessment and the treatment. Judge, either you or Phil, do you have an idea, are we meeting the standard that the state has set for timeliness for either assessment or treatment? You kind of alluded to the fact we're not, but just to be...
No, not on assessments.
So assessment, we're doing, because I know that had been an issue before.
Right.
And
that came up a couple of years ago.
And we've made great
the
progress
HHS
on that.
did a good job of resolving that.
Right.
And because the statute requires, they can ask for extra time, but the statute requires that the assessment happen within 14 days. And, it's maybe some weeks it's 21 or, not to 14, but they're close. Once upon a time, it was 2 months. And so the county's done a lot of good work in getting that assessment time down. But now the question is, once the assessment comes back and it says, you need to do this treatment, I think what you're alluding to is presently the waiting time for people who don't have a priority for some other reason is 9 months to get from the time of the assessment being completed until you can enter the treatment itself. So that's obviously a problem. But I know it's one that the county's working on. I think to some degree that's why the county stopped new admissions, was so they could work on their waiting list. That's at least what the head of behavioral health indicated to us.
All Are there any other questions, observations? Yes, Supervisor Lee?
I'm just disturbed that you have a couple people that have applied and want to do this, and then we're not allowing it right now, which I understand staffing is tricky, but it's really heartbreaking. I'm wondering if this is something that we can, I mean, I'm on HHS committee as well as this one, so it's a crossover for me. So I'd like to know more about what Bob Roart's doing to kind of help get this managed with behavioral health. So I don't know if it's maybe an agenda item at HHS, but obviously we need to work through this because it's not going away, this problem. And is this the financial part makes me crazy because, I mean, you're right. If they get a job, they can be ineligible for Badger Care, which is the whole state. That's above our pay grade, right? All of that. But would this also be another mandated program from with Child Protective Services? We have some things where the judges rule certain things and then we have to pay for it no matter what. Is this in the similar vein? Where we need a legislative answer from the state to fund these things?
Well, there's lots of things that are mandated in the fact that the courts are required to provide this sentencing guideline. Yeah, that's a mandate that indirectly affects us. It's not us that has to provide the service, though. We can go to private entities for that service, and if they have health insurance, that's great. It all works out fine. It's just that.
But when they don't,
it's that group of people, or in their cycle when they lose that insurance coverage, that it becomes the issue.
and then they fall back into, they fall out of treatment, and then the cycle contributes. It's like this. We have to stop it somehow. Sorry, I'm ranting.
Supervisor Carlson.
So when an indigent person doesn't have the insurance, is the county mandated to pay for it?
I have no idea.
Okay.
That would be something Corporation Counsel maybe would know, but I just issue the judgments.
Yeah, I would certainly support us trying to figure, of course, solve the problem, but I was just wondering if it is an actual mandate, because then that changes what we do. If it's an actual mandate, then we have to find the money. If it's not a mandate, we should still find the money, but. So.
True enough.
And I am researching that issue. I've been in contact with Dr. Golly to research that issue, and there are some administrative code sections that address the assessment, but I'm researching the treatment part of it to see whether or not that's something that is required to be paid by the county or how that works. So I will get back to Dr. Golly, and I'm sure that will get back to this board.
One aspect of that, I think, is that at least there has been provision for a sliding scale of cost depending on your financial ability for the treatment. In other words, and I don't know if that's been done by the county out of the goodness of the county or required, but if there's a sliding scale, let's just assume for a moment that there was a requirement that people who don't have much money should get a lower cost of treatment because they don't have enough money. If that's the case, and that is a requirement, then someone has to provide the sliding scale. And I know enough about private industry from my past life that probably Health Partners is not going to volunteer for a sliding scale unless they have other incentives. So that's a challenge.
And there are sliding fee scales that are set forth in Wisconsin Administrative Code, DHS Chapter 1, that's required for the assessments and the driver safety program. I just don't know if that same sliding fee scale applies to the treatment. So that is something I will research.
I think if I were to sum things up, thank you, Judge, for a very thoughtful and detailed report on a number of things related to treatment court and treatment generally. I think it's clear from the questions and everything that we're very interested in that topic as well. I think the administrator has heard that, and I know we're very lucky to have Supervisor Leaf on the HHS board, which is meeting later this month, and I'm sure she'll be taking these thoughts to her board, and perhaps you might find yourself reflecting on these items to that board in mid-January if the chairman of that committee calls upon you. But maybe if it's the will of the committee, we could ask the administrator to address this issue to the degree that he can in the next short period of time and report to us in February on any changes. Oh, I'm sorry, and thank you for that. We're not scheduled to meet in February. So I'm just going to say March, but knowing, as we say, that it's a critical thing for so many people, and perhaps the HHS board would have further guidance on that, but I think we'll leave it that we're very interested in this topic and hope we can have a progress report when we hear next from the administrator.
Mr. Chairman, if I could add one last thing, and I always like to make sure we invite people to come to treatment court. And I want you to know that quite a number of county board members come to treatment court. And our particularly graduations, our participants, we try to point out the fact that the county board members are there, and they very much appreciate that, the idea. And I think we're there every Wednesday at 8:30. You can come and see what's going on, and I think you'd enjoy it, and you'd be uplifted by it, and you'd get a sense of what we're trying to do for these, fairly limited number of people, but nonetheless people who are in the highest risk and highest need here in the county. So we'd encourage you all to come.
Thank you, Judge, and I echo exactly what you said. We'll turn to our medical examiner, Patty Schachter.
Good morning. Just a few things. First, in 2022, we closed out with 836 calls. We were down 12 from last year. We are making lots of referrals for 211 based on what we're seeing at the scenes. We had finished our first Planning Ahead class that we did with UW Extension. It was very successful. We did it at the Somerset Library. Just last week, one of the students that was at the class, I bumped into her grocery shopping, and she was very grateful because she had recently had a cancer diagnosis, and she had all her end-of-life stuff all planned out, and she was very grateful to St. Croix County for offering that class. So I will be doing that class again, and obviously it shows a need. Bumped into some historical data. I got 5 coroner's dockets going from 1929 to 1979. It's all the death investigations. I'm going through it now and just creating a database, keeping track of where all the homicides are, because our office has to keep the homicides for 100 years. Finding some very interesting, this one here is all in cursive, so it's a little challenging to read, but I do see a lot of old spinsters is how they're identified in the coroner's docket, and a lot of very interesting data. If you didn't know, in 1966, we had a population of about 25,000, and we had 36 traffic fatalities that year. When you put that in perspective of how we are now, it really shows a lot about how innovation and technology and public safety and death records really came into play. I think the biggest overwhelming thing that I'm seeing is the amount of people who drowned in that time. Drowning is just unbelievable, and that too, when you think about community development and community pools and community education and swing lessons and all that, and how that all came to be. It's very interesting reading. So we will have that already as we move forward. We had 107 decedents that we actually had for storage this year. The average stay is 2.5 days. A lot of that has to do with the fact that people don't have their affairs in order, and trying to find next of kin and all that is also very challenging, but it does add pressure. We were over capacity 12 times last year. And with the new cooler coming in February, this is really going to alleviate that problem and really has put us ahead of the game. Another problem that we're seeing is there is a shortage of not only forensic pathologists that we knew, but there's also a shortage of funeral directors, which then that also kind of makes our job and the storage of decedents until families can get everything arranged a little more complicated. But here in St. Croix County, we're doing that seamlessly, and I'm really proud of how this board has really worked to help us really be ahead of the game as we look at the aging population. So capacity is good for us. Since October 20th, we have scanned 29 people. Of those, 3 were from Polk County. That leaves us 26 cases. We've only had 1 that we've had to send for autopsy, which actually then, all these decedents qualified for autopsy, but by scanning them, we saved the county $49,000 in a little over 2 months. So that has really been a really positive thing. And then we have our CT scan, and then we get a letter from our provider for autopsies, and they are no longer accepting people who are 60 years old and over, unwitnessed, with a medical history of 1, or 65 years and older, unwitnessed, with a medical history. So that really puts us in a step ahead when it comes to ruling out trauma. Makes life a little more complicated for law enforcement, but because we have the CAT scan, we're able to, again, rule out trauma. Law enforcement can be in the room when we're doing the scan. We can actually have a conversation, and we're able to see a lot. And then we can then decide, along with law enforcement and any other people who are directly involved, if we want to get it out for an interpretation. We don't have to do it for an interpretation right away, but we can if there's any questions. So this has actually put us ahead of the game. And it also makes what we have going on in St. Croix County much more needed. So we're kind of pulling back the reins on expanding our services until we know that we have everything for our people here in St. Croix County taken care of first. That should be our first obligation, because the other counties, we could go through 3,000 scans really quick if nobody's doing autopsies on, I mean, I'm 63, I think 60 is really young. I mean, if I died unexpected, I would hope that someone would question it. So, but, you know, so this is going to be a challenge as we move forward, and the reason that this has come up is accreditation. You have to have, the autopsy providers have to meet the accreditation guidelines in order to meet that expert when they go into the courtrooms. So if they're doing, you know, way more cut downs per pathologist than is recommended, that can be a problem. So us having the forensic radiology is really, really a bonus here, and I'm so grateful that the board agreed with me and saw the futuristic part of the CT scan. So this is really helpful for us. Also, with that in mind, our provider for the radiologists are now working on a thing so that technology, so that each county, should they want to do our scanner, they would have to purchase their own forensic PACS system. So that doesn't lay all on us. So that's another reason to kind of pull back until they get that technology taken care of, so each of the counties have their own connection to the forensic radiology. We're seeing drug overdoses on the rise here in St. Croix County. We're kind of getting to the numbers that we were back in 2011 and 2015. So I talked to Phil about that, and I did send some photographs I wanted to talk to you about. And then we did have an exposure death during the storm. So that there was very unfortunate and very sad, but it's something that we never like to see. When we talk about our death investigation and what the judges are talking about, one of the things that myself, my office, first responders and last I have a throat thing, that what we see is a lot of living conditions that are just almost, it's unimaginable, and it used to be occasional, but now it's on a regular basis. And this is not a new problem, this is a bigger problem. And these are some of the scenes, and as you can see, this is a date code from 2015. And this person basically lived in their bedroom. They lived, they ate, they took their medications, they did their business. Everything in their bedroom, the house itself was completely full. it becomes a hazard not only for that person, but also it's a hazard for the people doing care, and then also for law enforcement. On the next slide, you'll see this here house. You'll note that again in disarray. This is in 2016, and you can see by the walls and everything how people are living. And again, we used to see it occasionally, and now we see it a lot. The next slide, you will see what happens. What this is transition, when someone transitions from either jail or Grace Place, whatever, and they go and have vouchers to the hotels. They move all their possessions into hotels, and we have quite a few hotel rooms that this is what it looks like. The next slide. This here, we have people that are living out in rural St. Croix County that have no running water. They have power, but they have no running water. And so there's no way for cleanliness at all. And this is what we see, and this is not unusual. Next slide. This here is what alcoholism looks like in our county. This decedent, this was over 180 bottles in this here room. This was an apartment. This is something we see, and Sheriff Knutson can verify, we see this kind of thing all the time. It is not unusual. So when we talk about addiction and drugs and meth and everything, we see this almost on a daily basis when we're doing our work. And it's very troubling. Next slide. This here is a couch surfer. All his possessions are in the totes. You can see he is oxygen dependent and virtually homeless, but living in a rural part of the county, and was not able to get the medical attention that he needed, and also was struggling with addiction. Next slide. This here is in an apartment complex. This person totally lock themselves into their apartment, and you can see again by the bathroom facilities that cleanliness and how this slippery slope starts, and then when you are hopeless, this is what it looks like, and we see it on a regular basis. Next slide. This here was a 3-generation addiction apartment. The person that died of the overdose was 79 years old. They had a 40-year-old child and another child living in this same apartment, living with addiction. We have been to apartments and homes where there have been gallons and gallons and gallons of urine stored inside the homes. Hoarding and mental illness and untreated addiction, people house themselves inside, and the first thing that they stop paying for is their garbage bill. So, and garbage is one of those things that you don't think about, but when you stop paying for your garbage to get hauled away, it's got to go somewhere. Next slide. This is what OCD looks like, and we see this a lot. This person had a very chronic disease, and you can tell by the way they took care of their sputum, the multiple folds and everything that was here. But this person made sure they got their medication every month. They had a whole room in their house that all it was their medications that was unused. They wouldn't use their medication, but look at how they lived this way. So mental health, again, is a huge, huge issue. Next slide. This here, again, was a multi-generational residence. This one here, the person hadn't left their bedroom in 2 years. Next slide. This here probably is the saddest of everything that I've seen pretty much in my career. This here person lived in a high-end housing area. They had a PhD. They were a veteran. They were an officer. They had everything going for them. The neighbor, this person left every day at a certain time, went to the local cafe, had something to eat, and then went back into their house. They were completely barricaded into their house. The neighbor would talk to them occasionally if they were able to time out at the time they went to the cafe. So they put that stick there to make sure that they kept track of his whereabouts. This person was deceased, as far as we can tell, for over a month before they were noticed. And the mental health then and the guilt that went to the person that put the stick there to keep track of their neighbor was, we spent more time dealing with him than we did with the decedent. And both of them were veterans. Next slide. So I think it's important for us to realize that most of these people struggling with mental health in addiction have contributed to our community. They either are currently employed or are retired and or have a disability and are living on a disability paycheck. Every level of education is part of this here problem. Most have insurance but don't use it. A lot, and almost all, are non-compliant with their medical and health care. Some were veterans. Most of them are multi-generational trauma. So we're now seeing the children of the 80s are now the ones we're dealing with now. And a lot of them have no idea how to ask for help, which then puts into the problem the judges are talking about. If we get help for all these people and we don't have the resources to help them, this is just a circle that is just going to keep on. And I know for all the different law enforcement agencies that I deal with all the EMS agencies and fire, this is something we are seeing on a regular basis now. This is not unusual, it is usual. And it is very hard for us, the ones that do this work, to see this over and over again and know that these people are lonely in plain sight. They don't know where to go. Next slide. So this is what it looks like. And when you look at what's going on in treatment court, what's going on with law enforcement, what's going on in the courts, we're seeing it more now than we've ever seen it before. And we just want all of you to be aware. I didn't realize this was going to be like all on the same topic, but we're all talking about the same thing. We see it all the time. We might not all see the same person, but we see people who are needing to be helped that aren't always getting it. And that's all I have.
Questions for the medical examiner?
I had one.
Shirley.
Few, and then I got into that, and now I don't know how to go back. The book, can I start there? What happens, you're making a database, but is that going to be archived or digitized or something? Because it is like a historical relic. Yes. Cool. Yeah. And then at some point, can we see the scanner? Okay. I think we should do that.
I think Patty was just saying yes, okay. And so we can schedule something.
And I don't know how to help hopelessness. It's sick. I don't know.
Medical examiner's report maybe reinforces why we took the actions we took in December and the full board took in December relative to augmenting some of the things we do in the public safety area. Any other questions from anybody right now? Thank you again, and I'll just simply say that the medical examiner was very accurate in everything she said, but if anything, she understated the tremendous job she and her staff did in December when they really did have some very critical things happening, and they met them in a very professional way, and thank you for that.
I just have, Janet just reminded me, here's my mandated services thing. If you have any questions.
Seeing none, we'll move to Mr. Gawley.
Sure, thank you. So I'll just want to piggyback off of what Patty had presented and talk maybe a little bit about prevention and intervention and how maybe we can intervene from some of those things taking place. We've talked extensively back and forth the last couple months, mostly about overdose deaths. And our department does probably the lion's share of the drug testing for the county for at least folks that are justice involved. So it's pretrial, treatment court, and diversion. And we do some CHIPS cases as well, so some family court stuff. And certainly not all of those individuals, maybe even very few of them, were actually justice involved. However, but some of those folks may be justice involved. So the idea then is how can we identify maybe some of the social factors that are responsible for that? I mean, sure, mental health plays a role. Obviously, substance use plays a role. Patty talked about isolation, physically and then otherwise. I think that idea of hopelessness speaks to that. So identifying some of those social factors. So what we've talked a little bit about is maybe convening a overdose death review team. That in the past, I think maybe there was one of these here in the county involving law enforcement. And just maybe start with a case study and look and see what are some of the factors. And I know Patty listed some there, but there are other factors as well that contribute to this. Maybe it's lack of social support, and then we can, again, move forward with intervening on some of this. So I just want to create a discussion surrounding this so we don't have to continue to see these instances take place. And I think, again, our department, with the drug testing that we do and identifying the drugs that we're seeing come through, certainly fentanyl, opioids, and otherwise, we can play a role in helping out here.
I'm guessing that we all thought that was a reasonably good idea, and given the previous report. Just a quick question. We had also just alluded to the fact that you were working on kind of a groundbreaking statistical report on overall criminal statistics in the county currently, and looking back a little bit historically. And we didn't have a deadline on when that was going to be done, but I know you were trying to finish things up in December for presentation at some point early in the year. Yep. Could you just give us an update on how you're doing on that, and if you're getting the support you need to do it?
Definitely getting the support. February's county board meeting, I'll present with our departments, and then a little bit at CJCC, our full board meeting next Thursday. I'll have kind of a snippet of some things, but yeah, those 2 dates.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Gawley? Oh, I'm sorry, Supervisor Adams.
I would just like to compliment you, Dr. Gawley, and your team on the work that you're doing. I remember one of the first votes I took when I got on the board was for you to come on, and there was a lot of concern about, you getting involved in other issues, but you're obviously moving to support the county and the residents of the county in a greatly positive way. So for you and your team, we appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I would just thank Kate and Shelby, the supervisors of the 2 departments in the back. They do like 95% of the work, so.
Screwed up, you'd get all the blame for that, so that's good.
If there's no other comment for Dr. Gawley, we'll move on to our last presentation under business for the day. And it's a new issue for most of us on the committee. We rarely hear from the emergency management side of the Sheriff's Department. And we have Natasha Cardinal with us today, and she's going to go over with us a little bit about the emergency management. And I just would note that under Article 4I4 of our rules and bylaws, we are the Emergency Management Committee for the county. So this is a very important thing, and I would just add that, and we had talked earlier about the fact that based on the presentation of Ms. Cardinal today and further discussions with her, we might want to look forward toward a tabletop exercise in emergency management sometime this spring. And Supervisor Adams had indicated that he would be more than happy to take the lead on that, I think, and his background is in that area. And so with that, I'll just turn it over to Ms. Cardinal.
Oh, nice. Good morning. You didn't tell me that this morning. Thanks for having me. I'm going to go over briefly a little bit about our emergency management program and then talk to you about how the county board is involved in disasters and emergencies. So this is our mission statement, and overall, emergency management has a framework to help our communities reduce threats, vulnerabilities to threats and hazards, and cope with disasters. We're often also the coordinating and assisting agency between our local emergency management activities and then state and federal resources, programs, and information. 4 phases of emergency management. So organization and management of resources and responsibilities that deal with emergencies and disasters kind of work through these 4 phases of preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation. Preparedness covers all of our emergency plans. All the time, I'd say probably 75% of our time is spent planning, putting plans together, going through them, training and exercising those plans, those standard operating procedures, simple things like having sirens, doing outreach in our communities, Response, so responding to a disaster or emergency, doing damage assessment, recovery, helping the community's recovery, whether that be economic, doing debris management cleanup, looking at like our tornado events and getting stuff like that cleaned up, helping residents with health and social services and connecting them to resources and programs, and our public infrastructure to state and federal programs that will help them recover, and mitigation. Mitigation really is what helps break the cycle of damage and repair, and includes things such as code and zoning, education, simple things like flood insurance, retention ponds, flood walls, buying that flood insurance, stuff like that. One example of preparedness and mitigation that we just had in the last week was our winter severe. It feels like a continuation going into 3 weeks, but we looked at the severe storm, winter storm event that we were getting over Christmas break, and it came with the counties north of us that the week before we saw that they had long-term power outages, mostly like Russ County, Washburn County, where they were up 2,000 plus people without power for extended 4 to 5 days. And going into that Christmas with sub-zero weather, and we had just spoke with our American Red Cross representative the week before, and she had stated that we would not have the support. So we have mutual aid agreements with Red Cross to do mass sheltering. And when we saw what was happening the week before with power outages, they were opening up community centers, town halls, things like that, just to keep people warm. And we would not have the support of the Red Cross because it's for a few reasons. It's a multi-county thing. They can't be in several counties at once to open up mass sheltering. 2, they didn't have the volunteers over the holiday weekend, and 3, they don't travel in more than 3 inches of snow with their disaster trailers. So we were kind of left with a problem and trying to figure out, well, how do we quickly, if we have mass, people without power, what do we do? And we can't open these shelters. So just an example of one of the preparedness and mitigation things that we were working through in the last couple weeks was how do we open up these shelters and get these people into a warming shelter? And we did a bunch of things, and I'm going to introduce Tim Kufis, who's our Emergency Support Services captain, and I'll let him kind of explain some of the things that we did last week for Christmas break.
Sure, thank you for the time. Yeah, with the concern of the weather coming through St. Croix County, we were worried about roads not being able to be traveled on and the electrical grid being affected. The fear is that people in St. Croix County would be out in the cold. And with the news of the Red Cross, we decided to deal with it ourselves. And what emergency management did was come up with a comprehensive plan that included communication with other agencies, communication with the public, getting up to 13 warming shelters ready if needed, and readying equipment for a quick response, as well as setting up 211 if there was an influx of phone calls requesting assistance. In the end, I believe we had about 2,600 residents without power in the Baldwin and Hammond area for about an hour. Thankfully, that was quickly resolved, and this plan was not needed to be kicked into action. It'll be a good template for us in the future. So that actually, the planning was very helpful for us to think about how we could deal with this in the future. So thank you.
A couple of the other things that we did was we created a web page for residents, and we put it out on the county web page. We did social media, and that web page linked a lot of resources. So preparedness tips for your car, travel, connecting 511. People may not know about 511 Travelin' and that app that they can download on their phone. Staying informed, power outages, maps, links, 211 stuff. If a warming shelter were to open, we put it on there. We would announce it through the sheriff's office. A bunch of different things that could connect residents if they needed help. And then, yeah, like Tim said, the connecting with 211 and activating disaster response with them as well. So just an example of one of the things that we did with preparedness and mitigation in the last couple weeks. All right, statutory requirements. So in accordance with Wisconsin State Statute Chapter 323 on emergency management, St. Croix County is mandated to designate a head of emergency management, develop and adopt an emergency management plan, and have a program that is compatible with the state's plan and assist the local units of government along with their emergency management plans and responding to a disaster. By resolution of the St. Croix County Board of Supervisors adopting that St. Croix County Emergency Operations Plan and Emergency Management Program, that took place on November 11th in 2011. This also applies, like I said, to local governments. So they're required to have an emergency manager at a local level, have emergency operations plans for their municipalities, advise county EM of their exercises and planning, participate in disaster response, and then also submit disaster assessment, damage assessment reports to emergency management at the county level. Most of our emergency managers at local levels are going to be your town chairs, presidents, mayors, city administrators, fire police chiefs. Those are who make up our municipal EMs. Let's see. All right, continued. Public Protection Committee. You guys are the oversight committee and have the responsibility of providing public policy oversight related to the protection of persons' property, public safety, emergency planning, and compliance with emergency management programs. Our local emergency planning committee, so those who have an interest in hazardous materials planning, also must have one member by state statute who is a member from public protection and serve on that committee by Group 1 membership, which is elected official, local elected official. So how does the county board fit into emergencies and disasters? Whenever there's an emergency or disaster that is about to deplete our resources or capabilities, an emergency declaration is often signed to declare whatever is necessary and expedient for health, safety, protection, and welfare of persons and property within the county. It involves reasonable orders, rules, regulations deemed necessary to bring the emergency under control. It also can help provide state aid, mutual aid from other local agencies and organizations. It invokes certain powers and authorities, and that depends on the emergency and what the elected officials decide. They're the ones making some of those decisions. And it also gives the state, the county, and municipalities a little bit of latitude while they deal with their emergencies and extra coordination. The lines of succession. So for an emergency, in our legal basis and basic plan of our emergency operations plan, it states that if the County Board of Supervisors can meet with promptness, a declaration can be signed. However, if not, the Board of Supervisors has established by adoption of this plan individual designees in line of succession of proclaiming an emergency or disaster. The line of succession designees are allowed by proclamation to exercise all powers of the County Board of Supervisors, and any proclamations declared shall be subject to ratification, alteration, modification, or repeal by the Board of Supervisors as soon as they can meet. Our county board chair and our sheriff are empowered to declare an emergency, and in the absence of the sheriff or chairperson, our alternates in the line of succession as listed in the EOP are our county board vice chair, public protection chair, county administrator, support services captain, and emergency manager. Training, exercises, and real events. All of the training and exercising that we do and we spend time working through is really just to provide us insight, review our lessons, prior experiences, best practices, any gaps in our planning, our training, looking at equipment needs, staffing needs. We spend a lot of time taking several different courses. We offer it out to all the first responders, elected officials. We just had an elected official training a couple months ago that we had quite a few people from different municipalities participate in. But emergency management there's a couple that we do every year, we offer every single year, and that's our annual Hazardous Materials Emergency Planning Grant. We apply for it every year, and we train between 200 and 300 first responders in hazardous materials, hazmat response training. It's a specialized hazmat training that they all do. Skywarn storm spotter classes, maybe some of you have been to those, but that is a program that was created by the National Weather Service to improve warning services that consist of trained weather spotters who report severe and hazardous weather. Emergency Management also attends an annual Governor's Conference on Emergency Management. That's coming up in the end of February, beginning of March, and an annual Wisconsin Emergency Management Association Conference. Exercises, that's a list of the exercises, some of them that we've participated in the last year or hosted. The SO is Sheriff's Office Missing Person, activating an EOC, pipeline response, participating with our hospitals in severe weather, tabletop exercises, working with Xcel Energy on the hydro dams, and upcoming in 2023, this year, we have January, we have a mass fatality exercise that includes Wisconsin Emergency Management, our Healthcare Coalition, a public health consortium, and our county will be participating in that. It's a simulated event, a county fair accident where there's missing people and a mass fatalities, and what would we do to handle that? So we'll participate in that exercise. And then we also have, February is going to kick off a regional multi-county project of a commodity flow study and a hazmat transportation exercise that will build over the next 3 years. So that's what we have to look forward to in 2023. And then recent real events. So everyone's familiar with the Public Health COVID Emergency Declaration from the last couple years. May 12th, 2022, this year earlier, we saw a severe storm in the town of Emerald and Glenwood, and that was mostly public infrastructure damage to roads. So we looked at a state program to help with debris and roadway support through a disaster fund to help support those townships. July 29th, we had that severe storm, town of Richmond, River Falls. Ended up not being much public infrastructure at all, but mostly to private residences. And September 17th of last year, that straight line wind that hit down by the public library and kind of moved up the hill through Vine, through the city, the town, and the village of North Hudson, quite a bit of damage. And they all submitted, of course it wasn't enough for any federal support, but we did get some support through the Wisconsin Disaster Fund. It's a state program that helps the municipalities out with some of their recovery and their costs related to those damages. Okay, personal preparedness. Just because it all starts in the home and it starts with all of you and every household is at the core of preparedness, I just put in here some personal preparedness tips on how to make a kit, a plan, how to stay informed, and I connected some resources at the end for you guys on how you can do that, because a lot of times you don't think about it, and in an event of a disaster, an emergency, when we need county employees and we need board supervisors and we need all of you here to help, we hope that it starts in your house and you're prepared and you can take care of yourselves and then come help us. Does anyone have any questions?
Questions for Ms. Cardinal? Supervisor Carlson.
Thanks, that was a good presentation. You mentioned early in it that there are plans already out. Where can we see those plans?
Our emergency operations plan, we don't have that out there. We have redacted. I can share that. There's information we have to redact from it. But we have our all hazardous materials plan is on our EM webpage, so you can go to Emergency Support Services and you can look at that plan. There is, let's see, so that's our all hazard mitigation plan. It's pretty extensive. It's like 300 to 500 pages. It's pretty exciting. But we're actually getting ready to go. It's a 5-year process to update that plan, and we are just starting to go through that process this spring right now. And our LEPC is actually our steering committee for that. So that is on our page. Our off-site facility plans, so looking at our hazmat, those facilities in our county who have hazardous materials, it's mostly sulfuric acid in our county, so battery operated. Those plans can be shared upon request. So if you want access to those, just request it. There's information on our webpage on how to get that. Yeah.
Supervisor Ramberg.
Yeah, what's 211 and how is that related to 511?
So 211 is United Way Services. So that's connecting residences to different information and resources. Their core mission is to help residents with safety, health, and education. So connecting them to an abundance of resources and supplies, people in need. We use them, so emergency management, and with the flux of calls that we'll get for damage assessment. So just looking back, thinking to the flooding incident that happened in 2020 out in, throughout across the county, but over mostly in Baldwin, Woodville, we were getting numerous calls of damage. And so we put a message out there that the residents could call 211 to report their damage. So then that report will come back to me in a spreadsheet. And it's easier for us to just, instead of fielding hundreds of calls, we'll have them call 211. They'll take the report and send it to us. And then connect them to any resources they may need. Yep. And then 511 is the Department of Transportation. Yep.
Are there any other questions? Comment.
Great work. I mean, we planned ahead. Luckily, we didn't need it, but this is great. And I can rest assured that we have things covered here in St. Croix County. So thank you for all that you do.
You're welcome.
If I could just ask for one clarifying question.
Yeah.
Who is our emergency manager?
It's me. I'm the emergency management manager.
Now, what role, and I should know this, but what role does our county chairman play? Because I thought he was designated as our, well, he declares emergencies with the sheriff, but does he not have another official role? Not so much. Oh, okay. Okay.
Maybe in another place where there wasn't an emergency manager, maybe.
Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, the elected officials and looking at the county board chairman, so responsible for proclaiming that a local emergency, approving emergency orders, and a whole list of things of what could be in those orders. It really just depends on what the emergency is. But having that active role in what goes on that emergency declaration, what do you want to see, what needs to be on there.
And my last comment / question would just relate again to this body serving as the Emergency Management Committee. I believe Supervisor Leaf is our designee to the local Emergency Policy Committee, but since we have a identified duty, and we talked earlier about the fact that maybe we could exercise that duty at some point in the spring, and again, if Supervisor Adams is willing to take on the task of coordinating with you that job, we can leave that unspecified as to whether it would be March or April. But if that would work, I think it would be important, since we're designated to do it, that we should at least go up one level of knowledge as to what our role should be, and make sure that whatever you are expecting of us, we're at least minimally able to provide. Are there any other questions? If they're not, thank you again for all the work you do in your office. That will go to request for future agenda items. Again, we're not, I'm sorry, I was just going to add that we're not meeting in February pursuant to our decision in December to not meet in February, and that can always be changed if there's an urgent necessity. Supervisor Rember.
Well, I was thinking for March or beyond, we had spoken at a couple of the other meetings on the state funding opportunities to try to encourage the state to fund those defense attorneys, I think it was, that either we don't have enough or we don't have enough funding for them, and then we're burdened with that, or counties are burdened with that. So to just start to get our head around that and start, you know, I don't know if it would be a resolution or a contact with WCA, just to try to keep that conversation going and to see if there's something that we can do from our perspective as a committee level to assist with that. I think that was one. And then the other one, maybe just...
If I could just address that real quickly while you're on it. I can't recall specifically all the conversations I've had, but I know we also, the payments for defense attorneys was one issue that had been raised by Judge Needham, And also, the district attorney had raised the issue with personnel and pay, and we did pass resolutions on those in the December board meeting. On the DA one. But on both issues, I know I've personally spoken to a couple of our local state representatives, and I know that Supervisor Osnes and Telejohn and I are going to be meeting with a number of those representatives as part of our role in the Wisconsin Ambassadors Program for the WCA on January 25th, and I will be sure to raise both issues with them at that time as well.
Okay, maybe just an update on the March, April as to how that's going would probably suffice for what I'm looking for.
Sure, an update, sure, absolutely. Hearing none. Janet, any announcements, correspondence? None. With that, we'll be adjourned at 9:38, and our next meeting will be in March. Thank you.